Hello, welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. I'm David Sneathen. I'm going to tell you a story today. We're going to read The Last Battle, and this is the final book in the Narnia series. So I really hope that you enjoy it as much as we have the first 6 books. And we'll start that in just a minute. But what we're going to start with now is John chapter 12, because it is the 12th day of the month of May. 12th day. I didn't mean for that to be a rhyme, but it was. So there you go. You got a free rhyme out of that. Hi, Mom! Is Becca going to show up? Okay, I'm going to start reading. John chapter 12 is kind of long, so we're going to go ahead and get started with it. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at the table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume, but Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples, he who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this anointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me with you." When the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there, they came not only on account of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well, because on account of him, many Jews were going away and believing in Jesus. The next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying out, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel." And Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, just as it is written, "Fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt." His disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things had been written about him and had been done to him. The crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to bear witness. The reason why the crowd went to meet him was that they had heard he had done this sign. So the Pharisees said to one another, "You see that you are gaining nothing. Look, the world has gone after him." Now among those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks. So these came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and asked him, "Sir, we wish to see Jesus." Philip went and told Andrew. Andrew told Philip and went and told Jesus. And Jesus answered them, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Whoever loves his life loses it, and whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there will my servant be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came from heaven, "I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again." The crowd that stood there and heard it said that it had thundered. Others said, "An angel has spoken to him." Jesus answered, "This voice has come for your sake, not mine. Now is the judgment of the world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out." The ruler of this world being the devil, of course. "And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." He said this to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So the crowd answered him, "We have heard from the law that the Christ remains forever. How can you say that the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man?" So Jesus said to them, The light is among you for a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. The one who walks in the darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of light." When Jesus had said these things, he departed and hid himself from them. Though he had done so many signs before them, they still did not believe in him, so that the words spoken by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. "Lord, who has believed what he has heard from us, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?" Therefore they could not believe. For again Isaiah said, "He has blinded their eyes and hardened their heart, lest they see with their eyes and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them." Isaiah said these things because he saw his glory and spoke of him. Nevertheless, many, even of the authorities, believed in him, but for fear of the Pharisees, they did not confess it, so that they would not be put out of the synagogue. For they loved the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. How many people in the church today can say that? Love the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. And Jesus cried out and said, "Whoever believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me. And whoever sees him who sent me, and whoever sees me sees him who sent me. I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. If anyone hears my words and does not keep them, I do not judge him, for I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. The one who rejects me and does not receive my words has a judge. The word that I have spoken will judge him on the last day. For I have not spoken on my own authority, but the Father who sent me has himself given me a commandment, what to say and what to speak. And I know that his commandment is eternal life. What I say, therefore, I say as the Father has told me." And that is the end of chapter 12. Pretty harsh words there. Chapter 13 tomorrow. Of course, that's washing of the disciples' feet. So that's chapter 13. That's coming up tomorrow. And now get on with the howdy, guten tag, guten abend, hello, hi, hi. Okay. We said hi as many times as I can think possibly feasible. So hi, everybody. So the last battle is obviously the final book in the Narnia series. I wanted to read something real fast. There's no dedication in this book. There is a map. And as you know, I've been showing you all these pictures. The pictures are drawn, illustrated by Pauline Baynes. And there's a little, this is on the copyright page, which, by the way, these books are about 70 years old now, so they're still under copyright. And technically, you know, I don't think anybody's going to complain for, 10 views that I'm going to get, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, but this is on the copyright page, and I thought this is interesting. And this is actually on all of the books in the copyright page, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. For the first time, this book is available. This is the 50-year anniversary that came out in 2000 when we got them. Actually, Rebecca bought them for us when she was like 11 days old for our anniversary. For our first anniversary when she was 11 years old. Yeah, less talking, more reading. Thank you, Daniel. Okay. For the first time, this book is available with full color, complete interior illustrations by Pauline Baynes and a full color jacket that Miss Baynes created for the book in the 1950s. So this is actually the original pictures that were in the original edition. Obviously, this is the 50th anniversary edition that's 20 years old. And then it goes on and it says the HarperCollins editions of the Chronicles of Narnia have been renumbered in compliance with the original wishes of the author, C.S. Lewis. So the new order, which has Magician's Nephew first and Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe second, is actually, according to this, the original wishes of the author C.S. Lewis. However, I think that, as I said yesterday, that the it kind of spoils the magic of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe a little bit, I think, to know where the wardrobe came from before you go into it. So that, I don't know, from a storytelling point of view, I think it makes better sense in the way that we're reading them here. So there it is. All right. So without further ado, there's no dedication page for whatever reason. This is The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis, Chapter 1, by Cauldron Pool. In the last days of Narnia, far up to the west beyond Lantern Waste and close behind the great waterfall, there lived an ape. He was so old that no one could remember when he had first come to live in those parts, and he was the cleverest, ugliest, most wrinkled ape you can imagine. He had a little house built of wood and thatched with leaves up in the fork of a great tree, and his name was Shift. Kimberly, his name was Shift. There were very few talking beasts or men or dwarves or people of any sort in that part of the wood, but Shift had one friend and neighbor who was a donkey called Puzzle. Kimberly, Shift's neighbor was a donkey called Puzzle. At least they both said they were friends, but from the way things went on, you might have thought Puzzle was more like Shift's servant than his friend. He did all the work. When they went together to the river, Shift filled the big skin bottles with water, but it was Puzzle who carried them back. When they wanted anything from the towns further down the river, it was Puzzle who went down with empty panniers on his back and came back with the panniers full and heavy. And all the nicest things that Puzzle brought back were eaten by Shift. For as Shift said, "You see, Puzzle, I can't eat grass and thistles like you, so it's only fair I should make it up in other ways." And Puzzle always said, "Of course, Shift, of course, I see that." Puzzle never complained, because he knew that Shift was far cleverer than himself, and he thought it was very kind of Shift to be friends with him at all. And if ever Puzzle did try to argue about anything, Shift would always say, "Now, Puzzle, I understand what needs to be done better than you. You know you're not that clever, Puzzle." And Puzzle always said, "No, Shift, it's quite true, I'm not clever." Then he would sigh and do whatever Shift said. One morning early in the year, the pair of them were out walking along the shore of Cauldron Pool. Cauldron Pool is the big pool right under the cliffs at the western end of Narnia. The great waterfall pours down into it with a noise like everlasting thunder, and the river of Narnia flows out on the other side. The waterfall keeps the pool always dancing and bubbling and turning round and round as if it were on the boil. And that, of course, is how it got its name of Cauldron Pool. It is loveliest in the early spring when the waterfall is swollen with all the snow that has melted off the mountains from up beyond Narnia in the western wild from which the river comes. And as they looked at Cauldron Pool, Shift suddenly pointed with his dark skinny finger and said, "Look, what's that?" "What's what?" said Puzzle. "That yellow thing that's just come down from the waterfall. Look, there it is again, it's floating. We must find out what it is." "Must we?" said Puzzle. And here's again Pauline Barnes. So nice that they have those pictures. I really like when they have original first edition pictures in a newer edition of a book. That I think it takes good. It's bringing out the original story. Anyway, okay, I'll continue and stop talking. "Of course we must," said Shift. "It may be something useful. Just hop into the pool like a good fellow and fish it out. Then we can have a proper look at it." "Hop into the pool?" said Puzzle, twitching his long ears. "Well, how are we going to get it if you don't?" said the ape. But, said Puzzle, "wouldn't it be better if you went in? Because you see, it's you who wants to know what it is, and I don't much. And you've got hands, you see. You're as good as a man or a dwarf when it comes to catching hold of things. I've only got hoofs." Can you show the pic again? Yeah, okay, I'll show the pic. You only see the edge of the pool in this, but you can see the cliffs and you can see the water. And there's Shift and Puzzle. Two little buds. Really, Puzzle, said Shift. I didn't think you'd ever say a thing like that. I didn't think of it. I didn't think it of you, really. Okay. Leave it to people to start texting me when I'm doing a live stream. Why, what have I done wrong? Said the donkey, speaking in a rather humble voice. Hey, hello. For he saw that Shift was very deeply offended. All I meant was wanting me to go into the water, said the ape, as if you didn't know perfectly well what weak chests apes always have and how easily they catch cold. Very well, I will go in. I'm feeling cold enough already in this cruel wind, but I'll go in. I shall probably die, then you'll be sorry. And Shift's voice sounded as if he was going to burst into tears. Please don't, please don't, said Puzzle, half braying and half talking. I never meant anything of the sort, Shift. Really, I didn't. You know how stupid I am and how I can't think of more than one thing at a time. I'd forgotten about your weak chest. Of course I'll go in. You mustn't think of doing it yourself. Promise me you won't, Shift. So Shift promised, and Puzzle went cloppity-clop on his four hoofs round the rocky edge of the pool to find a place where he could get in. Quite apart from the cold, it was no joke getting into that quivering and foaming water, and Puzzle had to stand and shiver for a whole minute before he made up his mind to do it. But then Shift called out from behind him and said, Perhaps I'd better do it after all, Puzzle. And when Puzzle heard that, he said, No, no, you promised. I'm in now. And in he went. A great mass of foam got him in the face and filled his mouth with water and blinded him. Then he went under altogether for a few seconds, and when he came up again, he was in quite another part of the pool. Then the swirl caught him and carried him round and faster, till it took him right under the waterfall itself, and the force of the water plunged him down, deep down, so that he thought he would never be able to hold his breath till he came up again. And when he had come up, and when at last he got somewhere near the thing he was trying to catch, it sailed away from him till it too got under the fall and was forced down to the bottom. When it came up again, it was further from him than ever. But at last, when he was almost tired to death, and bruised all over and numb with cold, he succeeded in gripping the thing with his teeth, and out he came carrying it in front of him, and getting his front hoofs tangled up in it, for it was as big as a large hot hearth rug, and it was very heavy and cold and slimy. Hey, Kim, can you go get my mouse? It doesn't automatically scroll, and it's hard to scroll without the mouse. There's the picture again. Okay. He flung it down in front of Shift and stood dripping and shivering and trying to get his breath back, but the ape never looked at him or asked him how he felt. The ape was too busy going round and round the thing and spreading it out and patting it and smelling it. Then a wicked gleam came into his eye, and he said, It's a lion's skin. Oh, is it? Gasped Puzzle. Now I wonder, said Shift to himself, for he was thinking very hard. I wonder who killed the poor lion, said Puzzle presently. It ought to be buried. We must have a funeral. Sorry, that was Puzzle. Oh, it wasn't talking lion, said Shift. You needn't bother about that. There are no talking beasts up beyond the falls, up in the western wild. This skin must have belonged to a dumb, wild lion. This, by the way, was true. A hunter, a man, had killed and skinned this lion somewhere up in the western wilds several months before, but that doesn't come into this story. All the same, Shift, said Puzzle. Even if the skin only belonged to a dumb wild lion, oughtn't it be given a decent burial? I mean, aren't all lions rather solemn because of, well, you know who. Don't you see? Don't you start getting ideas into your head, said Shift, because you know thinking isn't your strong point. We'll make this skin into a fine, warm winter coat for you. Oh, I don't think I'd like that, said the donkey. It would look, I mean, the other beasts might think, that is to say, I shouldn't feel. What are you talking about? Said Shift, scratching himself the wrong way, as apes usually do, the wrong way up, as apes do. I don't think it would be respectful to the great lion, to Aslan himself, if a donkey like me went about dressed up in a lion's skin, said Puzzle. Now don't stand arguing, please, said Shift. What does a donkey like you know about things of that sort? You know you're no good at thinking, Puzzle, so why don't you let me do your thinking for you? Why don't you treat me as I treat you? I don't think I can do everything. I know you're better at some things than I am. That's why I let you go into the pool. I knew you'd do it better than me, but why can't I have my turn when it comes to something I can do and you can't? Do be fair. Turn and turn about. Oh, well, of course, if you put it that way, said Puzzle. I tell you what, said Shift, you'd better take a good brisk trot down river as far as Chipping Ford and see if they have any oranges and bananas. But I'm so tired, Shift, pleaded Puzzle. Yes, but you are very cold and wet, said the ape. You want something to warm you up. A brisk trot would be just the thing. Besides, it's market day and Chipping Ford today. And then, of course, Puzzle said he would go. As soon as he was alone, Shift went shambling along, sometimes on two paws and sometimes on four, till he reached his own tree. Then he swung himself up from branch to branch, chattering and grinning all the time, and went into his little house. He found needle and thread and a big pair of scissors there, for he was a clever ape, and the dwarfs had taught him how to sew. He put the ball of thread, it was a very thick stuff, more like cord than thread, into his mouth, so that his cheek bulged out as if he were sucking a big bit of toffee. He held the needle between his lips and took the scissors in his left paw. Then he came down the tree and shambled across to the lion's skin. He squatted down and got to work. He saw at once that the body of the lion's skin would be too long for Puzzle and its neck too short, so he cut a good piece out of the body and used it to make a long collar for Puzzle's long neck. Then he cut off the head and sewed the collar in between the head and the shoulders. He put threads on both sides of the skin so that it would tie up under Puzzle's chest and stomach. Every now and then a bird would pass overhead, and Shift would stop his work, looking anxiously up. He did not want anyone to see what he was doing, but none of the birds he saw were talking birds, so it didn't matter. Late in the afternoon, Puzzle came back. He was not trotting, but only plodding patiently along the way donkeys do. There weren't any oranges, he said, and there weren't any bananas, and I'm very tired. He lay down. Come and try on your new lion skin coat, said Shift. Oh, bother that old skin, said Puzzle. I'll try it on in the morning. I'm too tired tonight. You are unkind, Puzzle, said Shift. If you're tired, what do you think I am all day long while you've been having a lovely, refreshing walk down the valley? I've been working hard to make you a coat. My paws are so tired I can hardly hold these scissors. And now you won't say thank you, and you won't even look at the coat, and you don't care, and my dear Shift, said Puzzle, getting up at once, I am so sorry. I've been horrid. Of course, I'd love to try it on, and it looks simply splendid. Do try it on me at once, please do. Well, stand still then, said the ape. The skin was very heavy for him to lift, but in the end, with a lot of pulling and pushing and puffing and blowing, he got it onto the donkey. He tied it underneath Puzzle's body, and he tied the legs to Puzzle's legs, and the tail to Puzzle's tail. A good deal of Puzzle's gray nose and face could be seen through the open mouth of the lion's head. No one who had ever seen a real lion would have been taken in for a moment. But if someone who had never seen a lion looked at Puzzle in his lion skin, he just might mistake him for a lion. If he didn't come too close, and if the light was not too good, and if Puzzle didn't let out a bray and didn't make any noises with his hoofs. You look wonderful. Wonderful, said the ape. If anyone saw you now, they'd think you were Aslan, the great lion himself. And here's a picture of Shift here, and this must be Aslan. Puzzle right there. So there they are. All righty. That would be dreadful, said Puzzle. No, it wouldn't, said Shift. Everyone would do what you told them. But I don't want to tell them anything. But you think of the good we could do, said Shift. You'd have me to advise you, you know. I think of sensible orders for you to give, and everyone would have to obey us, even the King of Narnia himself. We would set everything right. But isn't everything right already? Said Puzzle. What? I'd shift everything right? When there are no oranges and bananas? Well, you know, said Puzzle, there aren't many people, and in fact, I don't think there's anyone but yourself who wants those sort of things. There's sugar too, said Shift. Yes, said the donkey. It would be nice if there was more sugar. Well then, that's settled, said the ape. You will pretend to be Aslan, and I will tell you what to say. No, 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 said Puzzle. Don't say such dreadful things. It would be wrong, Shift. I may be not very clever, but I know that much. What would become of us if the real Aslan turned up? I expect he'd be very pleased, said Shift. Probably he sent us the lion skin on purpose so that we could set things to right. Anyway, he never does turn up, you know, not nowadays. At that moment there came a great thunderclap right overhead, and the ground trembled with a small earthquake. Both the animals lost their balance and were flung on their faces. There, gasped Puzzle, as soon as he had breath to speak. It's a sign, a warning. I knew we were doing something dreadfully wicked. Take this wretched skin off me at once. No, no, said the ape, whose mind worked very quickly. It's a sign the other way. I was just going to say that if the real Aslan, as you call him, meant us to go on with this, he would send us a thunderclap and an earth tremor. It was just on the tip of my tongue. Only the sign itself came before I could get the words out. You've got to do it now, Puzzle, and please don't let us have any more arguing. You know you don't understand these things. What could a donkey know about signs? Chapter 2, The Rashness of the King. This Shift guy sounds like a real clever dude, huh? Yep. All right. About 3 weeks later, the last of the kings of Narnia sat under the great oak which grew beside the door of his little hunting lodge, where he often stayed for 10 days or so in the pleasant spring weather. It was a low, thatched building not far from the eastern end of Lantern Waste, and some way above the meeting of the two rivers. He loved to live there simply and at ease, away from the state and the pomp of Cair Paravel, the royal city. His name was King Tirian, and he was between 20 and 25 years old. His shoulders were already broad and strong, and his limbs full of hard muscle, but his beard was still scanty. He had blue eyes and a fearless, honest face. There was no one with him that spring morning except his dearest friend, Jewel the unicorn. They loved each other like brothers, and each had saved the other's life in the wars. The lordly beast stood close beside the king's chair, with its neck bent round, polishing its blue horn against the creamy whiteness of his flank. Cannot set I cannot set myself to any work or sport today, Jewel, said the king. I can think of nothing but this wonderful news. Think you we shall hear more of it? Think you we shall hear more of it today? They are the most wonderful tidings ever heard in our days, or our fathers' or our grandfathers' days, sire, said Jewel, if they are true. How can they choose but to be true? Said the king. It is more than a week ago that the first birds came flying over us, saying, Aslan is here. Aslan has come to Narnia again. And after that, it was the squirrels. They had not seen him, but they said it was certain he was in the woods. Then came the stag. He said he had seen him with his own eyes, a great way off by moonlight in Lantern Waste. Then came that dark man with the beard, the merchant from Calormen. The Calormenes care nothing for Aslan as we do, but the man spoke of it as a thing beyond doubt. And there was the badger last night. He too had seen Aslan. Indeed, sire, answered Jewel, I believe it all. If I seem not to, it is only that my joy is too great to let my belief settle itself. It is almost too beautiful to believe. Yes, said the king with a great sigh, almost a shiver of delight. It is beyond all that I ever hoped for in all my life. Listen, said Jewel, putting his head on one side and cocking his ears forward. What is it? asked the king. Hoofs, sire, said Jewel. A galloping horse, a very heavy horse. It must be one of the centaurs, and look, there he is. A great golden bearded centaur with a man's sweat in his forehead and horse's sweat on his chestnut flanks, dashed up to the king, stopped and bowed low. Hail, king! It cried in a voice as deep as a bull's. Ho there, said the king, looking over his shoulder toward the door of the hunting lodge. A bowl of wine for the noble centaur. Welcome, Runewit. When you have found your breath, you shall tell us your errand. I'm going to give Runewit a chance to catch his breath while I show you the picture. There they are. A page came out of the house. A page is not from a book, it's a messenger from the court. A page came out of the house carrying a great wooden bowl, curiously carved, and handed it to the centaur. The centaur raised the bowl and said, I drink first to Aslan and truth, sire, and secondly to your majesty. He finished the wine, enough for 6 strong men, and one draught, and handed the empty bowl back to the page. Now, Runewit, said the king, do you bring us more news of Aslan? Runewit looked very grave, frowning a little. Sire, he said, you know how long I have lived and studied the stars, for we centaurs live longer than you men, and even longer than your kind, Unicorn. Never in all my days have I seen such terrible things written in the skies as there have been nightly since this year began. He must be living in 2020. The stars say nothing of the coming of Aslan, nor of peace, nor of joy. I know by my art that there have not been such disastrous conjunctions of the planets for 500 years. It was already in my mind to come and warn your majesty that some great evil hangs over Narnia, but last night the rumor reached me that Aslan is abroad in Narnia. Sire, do not believe this tale. It cannot be. The stars never lie, but men and beasts do. If Aslan were really coming to Narnia, the sky would have foretold it. If he were really come, all the most gracious stars would be assembled in his honor. It is all a lie. A lie, said the king fiercely. What creature in Narnia or all the world would dare to lie on such a matter? And without knowing it, he laid his hand on his sword hilt. That I know not, Lord King, said the centaur, but I know there are liars on earth. There are none among the stars. I wonder, said Jewel, whether Aslan might not come through all the stars, though all the stars foretold otherwise. He is not a slave of the stars, but their maker. It is not said in all the old stories that he is not, it is said, is it not said, in all the old stories that he is not a tame lion? Well said, Jewel, well said, cried the king. Those are the very words, not a tame lion. It comes in many tales. Runewit had just raised his hand and was leaning forward to say something very earnestly to the king when all three of them turned their heads to listen to a wailing sound that was quickly drawing nearer. The wood was so thick to the west of them that they could not see the newcomer yet, but they could soon hear the words. "Woe! Woe! Woe!" called the voice. "Woe for my brothers and sisters! Woe for the holy trees! The woods are laid to waste. The axe is loosed against us. We are being felled. Great trees are falling, falling, falling." With this last falling, the speaker came in sight. She was like a woman, but so tall that her head was on a level with the centaurs. Yet she was like a tree too. It is hard to explain if you have never seen a dryad, but quite unmistakable once you have. Something different in the color, the voice, and the hair. King Tirian and the two beasts knew at once that she was a nymph of a beech tree. "Justice, Lord King!" she cried. "Come to our aid! Protect your people! They are felling us in Lantern Waste! 40 great trunks of my brothers and sisters are already on the ground!" "What, lady? Felling Lantern Waste? Murdering the talking trees?" cried the king, leaping to his feet and drawing his sword. "How dare they?" "And who dares it? Now, by the mane of Aslan!" "Ah!" gasped the dryad, shuddering as if in pain, shuddering time after time as if under repeated blows. Then all at once she fell sideways, as suddenly as if both her feet had been cut from under her. For a second they saw her lying dead on the grass, and then she vanished. They knew what had happened. Her tree, miles away, had been cut down. That's obviously before she fell. For a moment the king's grief and anger were so great that he could not speak. Then he said, "Come, friends, we must go up river and find the villains who have done this, with all the speed we may. I will leave not one of them alive." "Sire, with a good will," said Jewel, but Runewit said, "Sire, be wary in your just wrath. There are strange doings on foot. If there should be rebels in arms further up the valley, we three are too few to meet them. If it would please you to wait a while—" "I will not wait a tenth the part of a second," the 10th part of a second, said the king. "But while Jewel and I go forward, do you gallop as hard as you may. Care Paravel, here is my ring for your token. Get me a score of men-at-arms, all well mounted, and a score of talking dogs and 10 dwarfs. Let them all be fell archers, and a leopard or so, and Stonefoot the giant. Bring all these after us as quickly as can be." "With a good will, sire," said Runewit, and at once he turned and galloped eastward down the valley. The king strode on at a great pace, sometimes muttering to himself and sometimes clenching his fists. Jewel walked beside him, saying nothing, so there was no sound between them but the faint jingle of a rich gold chain that hung round the unicorn's neck, and the noise of 2 feet and 4 hoofs. They soon reached the river and turned up it where there was a grassy road. They had the water on their left and the forest on their right. Soon after that they came to the place where the ground grew rougher and thick wood came down to the water's edge. The road, what there was of it, now ran on the southern bank, and they had to ford the river to reach it. It was up to Tyrion's armpits, but Jewel, who had 4 legs and was therefore steadier, kept on his right so as to break the force of the current, and Tyrion put his strong arm round the unicorn's strong neck, and they both got safely over. The king was still so angry that he hardly noticed the cold of the water, but of course he dried his sword very carefully on the shoulder of his cloak, which was the only dry part of him, as soon as they came to shore. They were now going westward with the river on their right and Lantern Waste straight ahead of them. They had not gone more than a mile when they both stopped and both spoke at the same moment. The king said, "What have we here?" And Jewel said, "Look." "It's a raft," said King Tyrion, and so it was. Half a dozen splendid tree trunks, all newly cut and newly lopped off their branches, had been lashed together to make a raft, and were gliding swiftly down the river. On the front of the raft there was a water rat with a pole to steer it. "Hey, water rat, what are you about?" cried the king. "Talking logs down to sell to the Calormene, sire," said the rat, touching his ear as he might have touched his cap as if he had had one. "Calormenes?" thundered Tyrion. "What do you mean? Who gave order for these trees to be felled?" The river flows so swiftly at that time of the year that the raft had already glided past the king and Jewel, but the water rat looked back over its shoulder and shouted out, "The lion's orders, sire! Aslan himself!" He added something more, but they couldn't hear it. The king and the unicorn stared at one another, and both looked more frightened than they had ever been in any battle. Here's a picture of the rat on the raft. A rat on a raft. "Aslan," said the king at last, in a very low voice, "Aslan, could it be true? Could he be felling the holy trees and murdering the dryads?" "Unless the dryads have all done something dreadfully wrong," murmured Jewel. "But selling them to Calormenes?" said the king. "Is it possible?" "I don't know," said Jewel miserably. "He's not a tame lion." "Well, bless you, Kimmy. Bless you, Kimmy." "Well," said the king at last, "we must go on and take the adventure that comes to us." "It is the only thing left for us to do, sire," said the unicorn. He did not see at the moment how foolish it was for 2 of them to go on alone, nor did the king. They were too angry to think clearly, but much evil came of their rashness in the end. Suddenly the king leaned hard on his friend's neck and bowed his head. "Jewel," he said, "what lies before us? Horrible thoughts arise in my heart. If we had died before today, we should have been happy." "Yes," said Jewel, "we have lived too long. The worst thing in the world has come upon us." They stood like that for a minute or two and then went on. Before long they could hear the hack, hack, hack of axes falling on timber, though they could see nothing yet because there was a rise of the ground in front of them. When they had reached the top of it, they could see right into Lantern Waste itself, and the king's face turned white when he saw it. Excuse me. Right through the middle of that ancient forest, that forest where the trees of gold and of silver had once grown, and where a child from our world had once planted the tree of protection, a broad lane had already been opened. It was a hideous lane, like a raw gash in the land, full of muddy ruts where felled trees had been dragged down to the river. There was a great crowd of people at work, and a cracking of whips, and horses tugging and straining as they dragged at the logs. The first thing that struck the king and the unicorn was that about half the people in the crowd were not talking beasts, but men. The next thing was that these men were not the fair-haired men of Narnia. They were dark, bearded men from Calormen, that great and cruel country that lies beyond Archenland, across the desert to the south. There was no reason, of course, why one should not meet a Calormene or 2 in Narnia, a merchant or an ambassador, for there was peace between Narnia and Calormen in those days, But Tyrion could not understand why there were so many of them, nor why they were cutting down a Narnian forest. He grasped his sword tighter and rolled his cloak round his left arm. They came quickly down among the men. 2 Calormenes were driving a horse which was harnessed to a log. Just as the king reached them, the log got stuck in a bad muddy place. "Get on, son of sloth! Pull, you lazy pig!" cried the Calormenes, cracking their whips. The horse was already straining himself as hard as he could. His eyes were red and he was covered with foam. "Work, you lazy brute!" shouted one of the Calormenes, and as he spoke he struck the horse savagely with his whip. It was then that the really dreadful thing happened. Up until now, Tyrion had taken it for granted that the horses which the Calormenes were driving with their own horses were their own horses, dumb, witless animals like the horses of our own world. And though he hated to see even a dumb horse overridden, he was of course thinking more about the murder of the trees. It had never crossed his mind that anyone would dare to harness one of the free talking horses of Narnia, much less to use a whip on it. But as that savage blow fell, the horse reared up and said, half screaming, "Fool and tyrant! Do you not see I am doing all I can?" When Tyrion knew the horse was one of his own Narnians, there came over him and over Jewel such a rage that they did not know what they were doing. King's sword went up, the unicorn's horn went down. They rushed forward together. Next moment both the Calormenes lay dead, the one beheaded by Tyrion's sword and the other gored through the heart by Jewel's horn. The next chapter is called The Ape in Its Glory. The first word is master. The first word is not banana, as Daniel requested that it could be. But let me check on JJ. He's alive! Who wants me to read one more chapter? Raise your hand. JJ says yes. Daniel says no. Kimmy? Kimmy's good either way. What are you going to read tonight? Yeah, you. I don't know. She finished her Aragon series. She has no idea. She's clueless. We don't have a library open near us, so there we go. Waiting for somebody online to say something. If Rebecca says go, then we're going to go. Something. Perfect. Thank you, Rebecca. That was so helpful. All right, I'll take that as a let's go. All right, because this is only... What, JJ, you're tired? You want to go another chapter? He said maybe. And I'm getting a phone call from Mom now. Video chat. Hi, you're on the live chat. Hi. How's it going? Mom says do another chapter. All right. Good to go. All right. Chapter 3. The Ape in All Its Glory. Master horse, said Tyrion as he hastily cut its traces. How came these aliens to enslave you? Is Narnia conquered? Has there been a battle? No, sire, panted the horse. Aslan is here. It is all by his orders. He has commanded. Where danger, king, said Jewel. Tyrion looked up and saw the Calormenes mixed with a few talking beasts were beginning to run toward them from every direction. The two dead men had died without a cry, and so it had taken a moment before the rest of the crowd knew what had happened, but now they did. Most of them had naked scimitars in their hands. "Quick, on my back," said Jewel. The king flung himself astride of his old friend, who turned and galloped away. He changed directions twice or thrice as soon as they were out of sight of their enemies, crossed a stream, and shouted without slackening his pace, "Whither away, sire? To Cair Paravel?" "Hold hard, friend," said Tirion. "Let me off." He slid off the unicorn's back and faced him. "Jewel," said the king, "we have done a dreadful deed." "We were sorely provoked," said Jewel, "but to leap on them unawares without defying them, while they were unarmed, foe. We are two murderers, Jewel. I am dishonored forever." Jewel drooped his head. He too was ashamed. "And then," said the king, "the horse said it was by Aslan's orders. The rat said the same. They all say Aslan is here. How if it were true?" "But, sire, how could Aslan be commanding such dreadful things?" "He is not a tame lion," said Tirion. "How should we know what he would do? We who are murderers, Jewel, I will go back. I will give up my sword and put myself in the hands of these Calormenes, and ask that they bring me before Aslan. Let him do justice on me." "You will go to your death, then," said Jewel. "Do you think I care if Aslan dooms me to death?" said the king. "That would be nothing, nothing at all. Would it not be better to be dead than to have this horrible fear that Aslan has come and is not like the Aslan we have believed in and longed for? It is as if the sun rose one day and were a black sun." "I know," said Jewel. "Or as if you drank water and it were dry water. You are in the right, sire. It is the end of all things. Let us go and give ourselves up." "There is no need for both of us to go." "If ever we loved one another, let me go with you now," said the unicorn. "If you are dead, and if Aslan is not Aslan, what life is left for me?" They turned and walked back together, shedding bitter tears. As soon as they came to the place where the work was going on, the Calormenes raised a cry and came toward them with their weapons in hand. But the king held out his sword with the hilt toward them and said, "I, who was king of Narnia and am now a dishonored knight, give myself up to the justice of Aslan. Bring me before him." "And I give myself up too," said Jewel. Then the dark men came round them in a thick crowd, smelling of garlic and onions, their white eyes flashing dreadfully in their brown faces. They put a rope halter round Jewel's neck. They took the king's sword away and tied his hands behind his back. One of the Calormenes, who had a helmet instead of a turban and seemed to be in command, snatched the gold circlet off Tirion's head and hastily put it away somewhere among his clothes. They led the two prisoners uphill to a place where there was a big clearing, and this was what the prisoners saw. At the center of the clearing, which was also the highest point of the hill, there was a little hut like a stable, with a thatched roof. Its door was shut. On the grass in front of the door there sat an ape. Tirion and Jewel, who had been expecting to see Aslan and had heard nothing about an ape yet, were very bewildered when they saw it. The ape was of course Shift himself, but he looked 10 times uglier than when he lived by Cauldron Pool, for he was now dressed up. He was wearing a scarlet jacket which did not fit him very well, having been made for a dwarf. He had jeweled slippers on his hind paws which would not stay on properly, because, as you know, the hind paws of an ape are really like hands. He wore what seemed to be a paper crown on his head. There was a great pile of nuts beside him, and he kept cracking nuts with his jaws and spitting out the shells. And he also kept on pulling up the scarlet jacket to scratch himself. A great number of talking beasts stood facing him, and nearly every face in that crowd looked miserably worried and bewildered. When they saw who the prisoners were, they all groaned and whimpered. "Oh, Lord Shift," "Mouthpiece of Aslan," said the chief Calormene, "we bring you prisoners. By our skill and courage, and by the permission of the great god Tosh, we have taken alive these two desperate murderers." "Give me that man's sword," said the ape. So they took the king's sword and handed it, with the sword belt and all, to the monkey, and he hung it round his own neck, and it made him look sillier than ever. "We'll see about those two later," said the ape, spitting out a shell in the direction of the two prisoners. "I got some other business first. They can wait. Now listen to me, everyone. The first thing I want to say is about nuts. Where's that head squirrel got to?" "Here, sir," said a red squirrel, coming forward and making a nervous bow. "Oh, you are you?" said the ape with a nasty look. "Now attend to me. Aslan wants some more nuts. These you've brought aren't anything like enough. You must bring some more, do you hear? Twice as many. And they've got to be here by sunset tomorrow, and there mustn't be any bad ones or any small ones among them." A murmur of dismay ran through the other squirrels, and the head squirrel plucked up courage to say, "Please, would Aslan himself speak to us about it? If we might be allowed to see him." "Well, you won't," said the ape. "He may be very kind, though it's a lot more than most of you deserve, and come out for a few minutes tonight. Then you can all have a look at him, but he will not have you all crowding around him and pestering him with questions. Anything you want to say to him will be passed on through me, if I think it's worth bothering him about. In the meantime, all you squirrels had better go and see about the nuts, and make sure they are here by tomorrow evening, or my word, you'll catch it." The poor squirrels all scampered away as if a dog were after them. This new order was terrible news for them. The nuts they had carefully hoarded for the winter had nearly all been eaten by now, and of the few that were left, they had already given the ape far more than they could spare. Then a deep voice, it belonged to a great tusked and shaggy bear, spoke from another part of the crowd. "But why can't we see Aslan properly and talk to him?" it said. "When he used to appear in Narnia in the old days, everyone could talk to him face to face." "Don't you believe it," said the ape. "And even if it was true, times have changed. Aslan says he's been far too soft with you before. You see? Well, he isn't going to be soft anymore. He's going to lick you into shape this time. He'll teach you to think he's a tame lion." A low moaning and whimpering was heard among the beasts, and after that a dead silence, which was more miserable still. "And now, there's another thing you got to learn," said the ape. "I hear some of you are saying I'm an ape. Well, I'm not. I'm a man. If I look like an ape, that's because I'm so very old, hundreds and hundreds of years old. And it's because I'm so old that I'm so wise. And it's because I'm so wise that I'm the only one Aslan is ever going to speak to. He can't be bothered talking to a lot of stupid animals. He'll tell me what you've got to do, and I'll tell the rest of you. And take my advice and see you do it in double quick time, for he doesn't mean to stand any nonsense." There was dead silence, except for the noise of a very young badger crying, and its mother trying to make it keep quiet. "And now here's another thing," said the ape, went on, fitting a fresh nut into his cheek. "I hear some of the horses are saying, 'Let's hurry up and get this job of carting timber over as quickly as we can, and then we'll be free again.' Well, you can get that idea out of your heads at once. And not only the horses either. Everybody who can work is going to be made to work in the future. Aslan has it all settled with the King of Calormene, Tisroc, as you dark-faced friends of the Calormenes call him. All you horses and bulls and donkeys are to be sent down into Calormen to work for your living, pulling and carrying the way horses and such like do in other countries. And all you digging animals like moles and rabbits and dwarfs are going to go to work in the Tisroc's mines. And no, 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 howled the beast. Can't be true. Aslan would never sell us into slavery to the kings of Calormen." None of that. Hold your noise, said the ape with a snarl. Who said anything about slavery? You won't be slaves. You'll be paid very good wages, too. That is to say, your pay will be paid into Aslan's treasury, and he will use it for all for everybody's good. Then he glanced and almost winked at the chief Calormene. The Calormene bowed and replied in the pompous Calormene way. Most sapient mouthpiece of Aslan, the Tisroc, may he live forever, is wholly of one mind with your lordship in this judicious plan. There, you see, said the ape, it's all arranged, and all for your own good. We'll be able, with the money you earn, to make Narnia a country worth living in. There'll be oranges and bananas pouring in, and roads and big cities and schools and offices and whips and muzzles and saddles and cages and kennels and prisons. Oh, everything! But we don't want all those things, said the old bear. We want to be free, and we want to hear Aslan speak himself. Now don't you start arguing, said the ape, for it's a thing I won't stand. I'm a man. You're only a fat, stupid old bear. What do you know about freedom? You think freedom means doing what you like? Well, you're wrong. That isn't true freedom. True freedom means doing what I tell you. Oh, grunted the bear and scratched its head. It found this sort of thing hard to understand. Please, please, said the high voice of a woolly lamb, who was so young that everyone was surprised he dared to speak at all. What is it now? Said the ape. Be quick. Please, said the lamb, I can't understand. What have we to do with the Calormenes? We belong to Aslan. They belong to Tash. They have a god called Tash. They say he has 4 arms and the head of a vulture. They kill men on his altar. I don't believe there's any such person as Tash. But if there was, how could Aslan be friends with him? All the animals cocked their heads sideways, and all their bright eyes flashed toward the ape. They knew it was the best question anyone had asked yet. Hey, what's going on in the other room? Folding laundry. Oh, I get it. You're putting laundry away. Okay, get it. The ape jumped up and spat at the lamb. Baby, he hissed, silly little bleeder. Go home to your mother and drink milk. What do you understand of such things? But the others, listen. Tash is only another name for Aslan. All that old idea of us being right and the Calormenes wrong is silly. We know better now. The Calormenes use different words, but we all mean the same thing. Tash and Aslan are only 2 different names for you know who. That's why there can never be any quarrel between them. Get that into your heads, you stupid brutes. Tash is Aslan. Aslan is Tash. You know how sad your own dog's face can look sometimes? Think of that, and then think of all the faces of those talking beasts. All those honest, humble, bewildered birds, bears, badgers, rabbits, moles, and mice, all far sadder than that. Every tail was down, every whisker drooped. It would have broken your heart with very pity to see their faces. There was only one who did not look at all unhappy. It was a ginger cat, a great big Tom in the prime of life, who sat bolt upright with his tail curled round his toes, in the very front row of all the beasts. He had been staring hard at the ape and the Calormene captain all the time, and had never once blinked his eyes. Excuse me, said the cat very politely, but this interests me. Does your friend from Calormen say the same? Assuredly, said the Calormene. The enlightened ape, man, I mean, is in the right. Aslan means neither less nor more than Tash. Especially Aslan means no more than Tash, suggested the cat. No more at all, said the Calormene, looking the cat straight in the face. Is that good enough for you, Ginger? Said the ape. Oh, certainly, said Ginger coolly. Thank you very much. I only wanted to be quite clear. I think I am beginning to understand. Up till now, the king and Jewel had said nothing. They were waiting until the ape should bid them speak, for they thought it was no use interrupting. But now, as Tyrion looked round on the miserable faces of the Narnians, and saw how they would all believe that Aslan and Tosh were one and the same, he could bear it no longer. Ape, he cried with a great voice, you lie condemned. You lie like a calamine. You lie like an ape. He meant to go on and ask how the terrible god Tosh, who fed on the blood of his people, could possibly be the same as the good lion by whose blood all Narnia was saved. If he had been allowed to speak, the rule of the ape might have ended that day. The beasts might have seen the truth and thrown the ape down, but before he could say another word, two Calormenes struck him in the mouth with all their force, and a third from behind kicked his feet from under him. And as he fell, the ape squealed in rage and terror. Take him away! Take him away! Take him where he cannot hear us, nor we hear him. There, tie him to a tree. Aslan will, do justice on him later. And chapter 4 is called What Happened That Night. And the first word is the. And I hope that you join us tomorrow so that you can find out what the rest of that word is, or the rest of the sentence. All right. So, is everyone enjoying the story? I hope everyone's enjoying the story. We will continue tomorrow. There's no comments for 17 minutes. So I hope that y'all are enjoying the story, and I will see you again tomorrow. I'm looking forward to finishing this book and finding out what happens. It seems extremely relevant for our own time, by the way. But with that, I'm going to bid you adieu, and you guys have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless.